Hello.
Hi there.
All right. Steve. Oh, that's going to be an edit right there.
Yeah.
Steve
Makohin.
Makohin.
Yeah.
Steve Makohin.
Yeah.
So I'm here with Steve Makohin, and I actually met Steve through some of his online writing on Facebook. And through deeper exploration, I discovered that he was also writing a book. And there was just a lot of crossover. As with all paths of wisdom, all roads lead to Rome, as they say. And I found a lot of interesting perspectives that he was writing about, or that you were writing about, as far as relationships and relating and the path to happiness and the sort of things that come up in the way. And then as a writer, I was also interested in the sort of creative angle. So I just invited you on for this interview, and we'll sort of see what unfolds from here.
I thank you for your invitation.
Yeah. So maybe from the little pre-talk that we had before, it was interesting to hear a little bit about your background. You'd mentioned that you were studying art at one point. So maybe just sort of speak to where you came from artistically.
All right. Speaking artistically and creatively is I've I grew up thinking that I'm and believing and feeling that I'm an artist, and I mean by visual artist. So I was into drawing, mostly drawing, painting, um, did some sculpting. So it was very much the arts. Didn't get into dancing at all. Uh, so that was me from a very young age. Just discover that that's just part of me. That's just something that feels natural, feels good for me. And I had always envisioned that I'm going to be an artist when I grew up. That was the thought. I went to the Ontario College of Art, so I'm an art school dropout, like the famous Ken Danby. That was fun. Uh, so that puts me at roughly age 20, and I fell into computers accidentally. So I had 1 year of high school computer sciences in grade 10, fell into a job, and then ended up doing that for income for the rest of my life. But career wise, I mean, artistically wise, I still wanted to keep on writing. So, doing artistic things. So in high school, I ended up writing a book that did not become a bestseller, got that published. I wanted to become a rock star and was pretty okay at writing music, playing music, pretty proficient. Wouldn't consider myself world class, but never got that professionally, and have been doing things that you might call artistic uh, ever since. Even in computers, my thing is designing user interfaces that are aesthetically pleasing as well as being really usable. So that combination of functionality as well as pleasing to the eye, and using art school tricks like the famous 1.6 to 1 ratio for field lengths. Uh, there's that ratio that is used in the Parthenon that makes it visually appealing. I used those ratios in design of screens for computer programs. So the person looking at it doesn't realize the guy's using that magic ratio, but visually they just look better. So that's me from a creative perspective, and I've become a voracious writer. Probably, let me think, probably going on to 12 years now. It was inspired by this book. I just started writing the stuff that I've been discovering on my journey of discovering lasting happiness. I started writing roughly 10 years ago, and the journey has been different. So as the journey evolved, the book keeps on evolving. So I'm roughly 85% of the way through. I speculate that it should be finished within about a year or two. Um, so that's the creative story in a
Lovely.
nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads there. I just kind of want to jump into.
Go ahead.
Could you speak a little bit about what it was like writing that first book in your 20s? And congratulations on getting it all the way to
Well,
being published and getting it finished, and just what that journey was like,
uh,
and maybe some of the struggles along the way as well.
would you like the uncensored version?
Please, always.
Okay. All right. So, high school, picture me as a 17-year-old kid. I had trouble getting to sleep. So, what I would do is I would have this sexually oriented dream, this fantasy that I would create. So it wasn't a dream, it was a fantasy I'd create, a science fiction sort of fantasy. And I would live that in my mind as I was trying to get to sleep. And eventually I would get exhausted and fall asleep. So the next night I would just continue it. Wherever I forgot, wherever I left it off, I would just keep on creating this dream in my mind and think about that. How does it evolve? Who do I meet? What adventures do I have? And eventually I'd fall asleep. So that would go on for months. Now, grade 12 English. My English school teacher, she assigned a book report to us, not a book. I think it was something like 7 or 8 books that we had to read during the trimester. And me being a lazy kid, I asked her, would you be okay if I wrote a book rather than reading several? And she said, do you think you can? I said, oh, sure. So she toyed with me and said, tell you what, write me the first chapter and we'll see where we go from there. And of course, I already had this idea. This whole plot was in my mind. So I knocked off a first chapter, I think probably in about a week or so. My mother had given me a typewriter for a gift. I don't know how many years prior to that. So I had a typewriter. I just wrote obsessively. And this was back in the days of physical typewriter, paper, and using whiteout to correct things. That's how long ago it was. So I wrote the first chapter, handed it in, and she looked at it with raised eyebrows, read it, and a few days later said, yeah, go ahead, write a book. So I did that. And at first it was easy because I already had the idea thoroughly thought out in my mind. I just censored out the sexy parts because I was in school. It just kept on writing until eventually I ran out of thoughts, and then I had to actually sit down and keep on working at it. So this is roughly about 2 or 3 months of every moment of my spare time obsessively writing. Something I had to my advantage was I daydream a lot. So because of this daydreaming a lot, I didn't know it at the time, but that's one way of allowing yourself to have focused, visualized direction. Through that process, you can actually have experiences in your mind that can take you in a certain way and also open up doors and channels for you of thoughts that you didn't have before. So when I ran out of the story in my mind of how my dream went, I just started daydreaming. Whenever I just sat down on my typewriter, I'd close my eyes and just daydream. Where does this thing go from here? And the thoughts would eventually come to me.
Right.
Now that process that I described to you of book writing, that's probably the worst process that you can imagine. And that is trying to write the last draft first. That it is just so hard to do that unless you have thought everything out infinitely. Usually that's the worst way to go. Would you like to talk about how to write a book in an easier way, something that's more logical?
Yeah, let's explore that.
Okay. I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version. If any of your readers are trying to write a book, a much better way to do that is not to try to write the final draft first. And that is get something that's convenient, usually a laptop with a word processor on it, so you can easily capture ideas. If you can, come up with the idea first, an overarching principle. What is this book about? If you had to summarize it, and write that out. What is it about? For example, my book that I'm writing now is about discovering lasting happiness. So that's the elevator 1-sentence summary of what is about discovering lasting happiness. Write that down, keep it as a vision. Then write down what you know already that you want to talk about. What chapters would you have? And you don't have to have them all. So if you say, I know the first 3 chapters, they're this, and you don't have to have the right name at this moment. What would the theme be of the first chapter? Summarize it in 1 line. Then in each chapter, what do you know so far that would be the sub-points that you want to get across in this chapter? So you might know the first 3 chapters, the first 5 bullets I want to get across in the first chapter, a couple in the second, a couple in the third. It's very rough at this point. Then start writing whatever you know at this time. And it doesn't have to be sequential. It doesn't have to be the overview. It doesn't have to be an overview or an introduction first. It can be an idea that you have that's fairly well crystallized that would fit somewhere in your book. You've got a few paragraphs, knock that out. Don't worry about it being clean and finalized. Just knock it out as you can. And as you get ideas, just knock them out, type them out, whatever you can, whatever idea you have that will get in your book. Eventually, you're going to start getting a large collection of ideas, not necessarily in the right order, but you'll have lots of ideas that are for your book. This is when you can start arranging it in a way that makes sense, reorganizing it because a word processor lets you do that really easily, and then fleshing out things as you feel inspired to. So you might get this feeling like this one paragraph I got here. I've got a lot to say about that. Before you know it, you've got several paragraphs on that theme. Okay, so you've got that fleshed out fairly well, and your book starts taking on a form that is gradually resembling the final form, but never quite being the final form until the end. And that's okay. So you're fleshing out part of a left hand, part of an upper right bicep, part of a knee, some toes, and eventually all the stuff starts fitting together. So the main idea I want to get across is don't try to do the last thing first, is allow yourself to write down and capture the pieces as they come to you, and then assemble the pieces as you keep on moving along. That's it in
Yeah.
a nutshell.
Yeah, brilliant. So I think there's so much in that, and I kind of want to go to two different places. One is this process compared to how you started out when you were a teenager, where you were sort of daydreaming, and then presumably, like, even how you described going to sleep, one night followed on from the next. And so there was a kind of linear progression,
Yes.
guessing through this story. And then you were trying to capture that linear progression. And then in this version, it's like, don't start out drawing the body and then filling all the bits in. It's just get your rough outline, maybe the sort of dot to dot shape of roughly what a man might look like or a woman might look like, and then you're filling in the organs in a way that comes naturally. So with this kind of difference, they don't need to be kind of in opposition to each other, but the element, how would you speak to the element of daydreaming within the first process, or perhaps some of the ordering the daydreaming in the second process in the outline versus the kind of ordering in the, had you had the tools you just outlined now, how might your process have looked different when you were younger?
When I was younger, I thought very linearly. So I always thought start at the beginning, end at the end. And that can work if you have a lot of time on your hands. And it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that process. It just takes a lot more time to keep on. The difficulty in that process is wherever you are now, I can only step forward from where I am now. And that's okay. It just takes longer. And it sort of resembles daily life. And that is wherever you are now, you can't get to the end from here in a single step. You can only move forward a step from where you are now. So as you're doing that, here's a good analogy for you. You can get from New York City to Los Angeles without ever seeing more than 200 feet in front of you and without a road map. So all you do is you travel at night, your headlights, they illuminate roughly 200 feet ahead of you, and you travel west. You just keep on doing that. Every night, you just keep on traveling west. And you'll make some mistakes. You'll eventually realize I'm in a city that can't get to there from here. So you backtrack. And it takes some time to backtrack. And then once you get back onto the main highway, you just keep on heading west. You take another route. So eventually you'll get there. With some backtracking, with some changing, with some taking steps back, you'll eventually get there. Without ever knowing where the end is, you will eventually get to Los Angeles. And life is sort of like that, is when you embark on the journey, you might not know the formula of getting from A to B, from getting from the beginning to the end. But as long as you keep on heading generally in that direction and knowing that it's okay to backtrack every now and then, that the path reveals itself as I'm on it. So you take a step, you see more, and you realize, oh, okay, I can take a right turn here. I think that's the right direction. You take that turn, you keep on heading in that direction until you realize it's not quite where I want it to go. You backtrack, you take another decision, and you keep on heading west. So that's the path that I took at age 17. And it's not really a wrong answer. It's just a way of doing things. I would say that the downside is it's slower than if you flesh things out a bit at a time. But ironically, it does resemble the journey of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really enjoyed that analogy, or the visualization of driving in the dark, especially. So yeah, there's another question I've got about
Go ahead.
There's something about gaining expertise and what it costs us in sort of innocent exploration. So I'm just curious to ask, is there anything in your sort of adult creative journey where you've looked back and thought, oh, if only I could get a little bit more of that innocence back? And by innocence, I'm sort of trying to touch upon some of those happy mistakes that you would make, or, you know, the expectations are so low. You know, your teacher asks you to do this book review of 7 different books, and you just have the somewhat audacity to say, how about I just write a book, you know?
Yeah,
And
you're
so
right.
there's something that there's, you know, the childish kind of audacity in us allows us to go places that as an adult we often don't tread. So I wonder if anything comes up on that for
Oh
you.
yeah. Oh yeah. That's a good one. Um, there is an author called Edward de Bono, and he wrote a book called Lateral Thinking. It's out of print now. If you could find it anywhere, get a copy. It is wonderful. The book is all about how to become more creative. And the general theme about this is in order to be creative, you have to step away from familiar structures. And the downside is the brain is constantly creating structures. So the brain, you can think of it as either being incredibly efficient or incredibly lazy. What the brain does is the first time you encounter a problem, it tries to solve it and it has no context for figuring this out. So this is as a very young child. That's why children are incredibly innovative, incredibly explorational. They don't know what the limits are. They don't know that the sky has to be blue and the grass has to be green. They just explore and they have the freedom because their brain isn't laden down with all these structures. As they live life, they end up having solutions to problems. And the brain creates this wonderful database of how do I solve this problem? The problem with that is as you encounter a problem, the brain doesn't look at it from a fresh perspective. It tends to look at its database and say, what thing in my database does this problem look like? What does it resemble? And I'll use that solution on this problem. And it may not be the best solution. It's a solution. And that's what the brain defaults to. That's the first thing it does and says, oh, this might work. And we just try it. And yeah, that's pretty okay. Like using a butter knife as a screwdriver. I did that before. I did it again. Yeah, it's okay. I'll use it. It's not the best answer, but it's usable. So if you want to be creative, instead of using that first answer, is choose not to use that first answer and ask yourself, if that wasn't available, what would I do here? So one of the things that De Bono has in his book is he has a number of principles. One of them was absolutum obsoletum, meaning if this is the absolute answer, it's obsolete. Throw it out instantly. Think of something else. Just to
Right.
be creative. You have an answer. Yes, it will be workable. This is a solution. Yes, it'll work, but throw it out. If you want to be creative, think of something else.
Yeah. Great. I haven't read the book, but it's come up a lot of times actually.
Yeah, there are all sorts of exercises too that you can do. One is here's a good one for your listeners. Uh, if you want to know how amazing you are, sit down with a piece of paper, not a word processor, because when you write things out, there's a process that happens in your mind that causes nebulous ideas to come together into clearer focus. So write with your hand on a piece of paper and write out 50 things that you appreciate about yourself, no matter what they are, no matter how trivial. I like my eyes, anything. 50. The reason being is the first few, possibly a dozen, maybe 2 dozen, will all be cliches. They're all things that come readily to mind. They're disposable. Fine, write them down. Then when you run out of those ideas, you're forced to think, man, I like the coffee I make. You know, when I make a cup of coffee, it's absolutely perfect because I know how I like my coffee. Write that down. I like the way that I can walk up to a stranger at a checkout line and strike up a conversation really easily and get to know people. Write that down. So as you're forced to think of things that you normally don't think about, you'll start discovering things about yourself that you didn't think about before, things you took for granted. And then when you end up with 50, if you're inspired to write more, go ahead, write more. But when you hit 50, realize I've just written down 50 things that I appreciate about me. That's a lot of stuff. Reread that list morning and night, and you'll start realizing man, I'm a unique person. I'm naturally creative. There's so much in me. There's so much depth in me that I've never realized before, just because I'm living day to day focusing outwardly. I haven't focused inward before. And now that I'm seeing 50 things that are amazing about me, wow, I wonder what's amazing about the person next door. That's just another example of a creative process of discovery.
Absolutely. So this is a good kind of jumping off point, I think, into the world of relating and how that relationship with your own creative process and with curiosity and a place of appreciation and gratitude and kind of acknowledgement of what we bring to the table. I think a lot of the times when we struggle with creative blocks, we're in a place of lack, when we're in a place of thinking that we're not good enough, maybe we're too old, maybe someone else has already done this idea better, and we're forgetting all of those unique qualities. You know,
Yeah.
we're struggling to come up with one, let alone 50. And yet shifting into that place where we that you just described, and we're acknowledging elements of ourselves that we like, and through that actually increasing this resolution of the natural born creativity that we just show up with day to day, whether we're appreciating it or not, it's there. And then how you finished up there of like, oh, and I wonder who the person next door is.
That's a
And
good conversation.
yeah,
Okay.
right. So we jump over from like appreciation of oneself to actually having space and sort of appreciating life at a pace where you actually can meet someone with a sense of curiosity to
Yeah.
get to know them.
Yeah. Part of a big part of my story was at age 48, after my second long term relationship of 16 years. I'm getting divorced, my choice, hating my life, just want to leave everything behind. Have left my second wife, left the house. I'm living in a new townhouse that I could barely get a down payment on. So the money that I should have given the tax man, I put as a down payment on my house, and now I owe the tax man a whole bunch of money. And I'm realizing for the first time in my life that I'm not a happy person. And I'm really coming to terms with this, that I'm not happy. And the big question comes, well, if you're not happy, what are you going to do about it? What do you want? And of course, there can be all sorts of nebulous ideas. Well, I want a new sports car. I want a bigger house. I want a wife. I want a girlfriend. I want this. But what theme would I put on this? And I came up with two answers. The theme was I wanted more love in my life and more peace in my life because I had a really argumentative kind of relationship with my partner. So I want more love. I want more peace. Those are the themes. So I was fortunate to have read a quote by Gandhi that said, and I'm trying to remember this from memory, it's something to the effect of be the change you seek to find in the world. So instead of trying to get love, instead of trying to get peace, I decided I'm going to conduct an experiment. I'm going to try to figure out how to become loving and how to become peaceful. Now, that in itself sounds inconsequential, but it was the beginning of a turning point in my life. And I had no idea at the time because when I made that decision, how to become loving, that opens up a whole can of worms. What does that mean? Become loving. What does it look like? And there's no answer. No one can hand you the answer that says, to be more loving, here's the answer, just go in that direction. I had to figure out myself, what does more loving look like? What does that mean? And now we're getting back to the creative process. And I didn't know this at the time, but the creative process starts with asking that big question: what does this look like? How does it mean? And exploring that, choosing to explore that deeply. So, what I did in every spare moment of my time when I wasn't working, trying to make money, or trying to find a girlfriend, because I didn't abandon that entirely, is I was trying to figure out, how do I figure out what more loving looks like? And I would be receptive to all sorts of information. Watch this DVD, watch this YouTube, read this book, read this article here. I was just looking for anything that might help me, not the answer, but an answer, anything that I could piece together that could give me a piece of the puzzle that makes sense to me. And that focus of deciding I want to go in this direction, I want to get answers that answer these questions, and looking for that and being receptive to it, and also being willing to change your thoughts on something. So the belief I used to have is I just need to find the wife who will make me happy. And that was immediately challenged with that new principle, the new direction of become a more loving person rather than trying to find a woman who will be loving to me and give me what I want. Totally different direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go further down
Go ahead.
this relationship route, but just to jump back to creativity during
Yeah.
those years when you were quite unhappy.
Yeah.
What did that look like? I know that you mentioned you were developing software and you obviously there's creative principles that you were applying. I'm just curious, like beyond what you did for work and payment,
Yeah.
were you expressing yourself creatively in that period?
I did. I started up a software company, and uh, very small software company, but I started up the software company, and my thing was I created developer tools for Mac programmers, Macintosh programmers. And at the time, my company was one of the biggest names around. It was one of the bigger names in software development. I got some awards for it. So I was doing that, and that was the creative outlet. So there was constant creativity of how do I do this better? How do I solve this problem for these developers, for this group of people? How do I solve that problem in a new way? And the software was recognized for being very quick, very compact. This is back in the days when if you had 1 megabyte of memory, you had to figure out how to squeeze an application into 1 megabyte. This is in the I would say 1990s, roughly about then, 1990s. Yeah, that sounds about right. Throughout the 1990s, so uh, things were very different then. You had to have very efficient code that would work with a very weak processor running at 8 megahertz or 12 megahertz, slower processors, tight memory constraints. So I was doing that. So I was, in a way, following the dream. When people say, if you follow the dream, everything will come into place. Well, it didn't. The reality was I was doing work that I loved doing. It was very creative, and it was making enough money to get by. I never got rich on it. So the money you get, you have to reinvest into research and development again. You've got to figure out how to streamline your shipping processes. So I was just getting barely enough money to get by. So that was putting a strain on me. And what I didn't know at the time is I was a workaholic. So we'll talk a little bit later about what an addiction is. Workaholism is a form of addiction. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was using my work, my obsessive focus on my work and on this creative process of writing these great developer tools as an escape of not having to look inward at what was really hurting me. It's almost like a drug. So,
Mm.
on one hand, I was living the dream, follow your passion. I was doing that. And yet my problems weren't cured. I was still suffering and still using workaholism as a distraction from that inner suffering. So that was one part of it. That was one part of my life. My relationship, I was living with my second long term partner. We were sharing a house, her house. I moved in with her. So needing to pay the bills, trying to figure out how to get that going, working obsessively 7 days a week, and trying to figure out how to make my relationship with my partner work. Because initially, when you get together with somebody, you have this new relationship energy, NRE. Everything is easy. The sex is frequent and hot. Everything is new. You're discovering each other. The freshness is there. After a few years, that NRE fades away and you become regular people. So if all you had was the sex and the excitement, there are problems after that because what do you have aside from that? The sex isn't frequent and hot anymore because you're not new to each other anymore. So you better have something more in common with each other that you enjoy, that draws you there, that makes you go, wow, I really do like that. I want to do that. And I didn't know that at the time. I thought that we get along. That's cool. We go out on an occasional date for dinner somewhere. That's cool. That's fine. I had no idea that I'm not investing my time in my relationship with my partner. I was focused almost exclusively on my business and developing that. So that was another piece of the puzzle. And trying to fix that, it was the typical things of problem solution, problem solution, problem solution, as opposed to what's at the root of my problems. I never looked at that. And usually, when we look at problems, we look externally. My girlfriend isn't doing this, and I would want more of it. I want more of this. I want a bigger house. So, how do I get it? I want a new car. How do I get it? We're looking externally rather than internally and asking the questions of what within me is driving me in this direction? Why is this important to me? Why is this thing a crisis for me? Why do I get upset under these circumstances? Once we get closer to that inner stuff, and once we start tending our inner stuff, that's when our outer world starts changing dramatically. And I didn't know it at the time. So I was never smart enough to know the answers ahead of time. I was always making the mistake, suffering, hurting. Eventually it gets so bad that I make a change. Only when it got so horrifically bad that I decided I'm making a change. That was my life. So I wasn't a bright guy who knew the answers ahead of time and said, oh, there it is. I'm brilliant here. I just do this.
I'm not sure how many of those are out there, but I hear you. This thing of seeking the solution externally, and it's one of those, I think, all the great wisdoms point to this being a dead end, and yet when you're living your life, it's very alluring. It's a great illusion that maybe really I just need the bigger house, or it's almost so sort of banal to say it, because we, it falls on deaf ears. We're like, yeah, we know that. And but yet to see
it looks true, doesn't it? It looks
absolutely
true. Yeah.
Yeah. And this sense of accomplishment, there's this link between having some sort of external confirmation that we are accomplished. And then through that, I can relax. When I've written this book, I can relax because I will have achieved the status of someone who's written a book.
Yeah.
And there is some sort of link there. And yet I think in the way that it almost torments us, because it can take so much away from our energy of being in the moment and sort of trusting the process and allowing ourselves to kind of enjoy the journey, that even if we do get to the end, we're really still back at we're still in the same place, because we've achieved something externally without having that level of reflection that we're really after.
Yeah. So you've touched on a number of things that are really good to talk about. Earlier, you talked about a lack. The lack drives us to want something to fill the lack. And I'd like to shine a light on that, is that we believe it's a lack because we have a lack-based mindset. So there is no actual lack, but we believe it is. And the same thing with defect is we believe there's a defect that needs to be fixed. So we try to fix it, but we just believe there's a defect. And I want to touch on that with a bit more detail. I will share with your listeners what I call a well-being self-check. So listeners, to yourself, answer how strongly you resonate with each of these statements. 0 being strongly disagree, 10 being strongly agree, 5 being neutral. I'll make 5 statements, and how strongly do you agree with them? 1, I feel whole and complete. 2, I feel content. 3, I feel fulfilled. 4, I am at peace / I am not restless. 5, I am never lonely. I am never bored. So if you could say 10, I'm solid on all of these, you'd have a great life, wouldn't you? You're feeling content. You're feeling, I'm whole, I'm complete. I'm not looking for a better half to complete me. I am complete as a human being. I'm content. I'm happy where I am. I feel fulfilled. I'm never bored. I'm never lonely. Life would be great. The reality is, when I do this with people, virtually all of them have not so much in their answers. No, not that one. Oh, not so much. Kind of, sort of. So if you're in a relationship now, if you're in a couple, ask yourself the same questions. Before I pair it up, how would I answer these questions? And chances are they'd be fairly similar. So now I'm shining a light on the illusion of lack. What our society tells us is it's normal to feel like discontent and to feel unfulfilled. That's totally normal. And the way you fill that in is by getting the stuff that you need to fill that lack. You feel this because of lack. That's what our society tells us. So I'm feeling lonely because I don't have a partner. Well, hang on for a second. You live in a town of 600,000 people, or you live in Manhattan with 12 million people. So how can you be lonely amongst millions of other humans, or in a town where there are thousands around you? How can you possibly feel lonely? And I'll skip to the end. The answer is you're not feeling lonely because of lack of people. You're feeling lonely because you're not connecting with them. And that there's a difference. So we believe I'm feeling this sense of restlessness because I need something to fill it. I need that new car, or I need that new house, or I need that new adventure. That's what we believe. We believe the lack is there. That's what's causing us to feel this, therefore fill the lack, and it's great and we're done. But the reality is, if we run the experiment, no matter how many times we do it, that lack never gets filled. True story, true story. I met a guy, he was one of my best friends. And at the time, I'll date this back to when he was roughly 48 years old, close to 50. At that time, he had owned over 50 cars in his life. And he started at age 15. He bought his first car when he was too young to even drive it. On average, that works out to a new vehicle every 8 months. His answer was, I love cars. That's why I get new cars. Great. Awesome. He's had Ferraris, Porsches. I don't think a Lamborghini. He had a Lotus, Aston Martin, a lot of big names, some fun vehicles, some rare, prestigious ones. His story was, I love new cars. That's why I get them. And I get bored with them easy. That's why I get a new one. So he didn't realize, isn't this sort of like an addiction? Isn't it sort of like a habit where you get the initial thrill? You think that's what you need. You get it. You feel good for a while. The thrill wears off and you got to do it again. And you never get fed. You never end up at the end where you say, I'm done. I've finally had enough cars. I am fulfilled. I don't need to do the car thing anymore. You never reach the end. And that's revealing. That's telling you something. And that is what we're looking for to fill the gaps isn't the real thing. So here's the insight. Imagine someone who is an infant of maybe 1, 2, 3 years old. So infants, they naturally internalize everything narcissistically. They believe everything's about me. At a very young age, an infant doesn't even know that the mother and I are two different beings. They have no concept of separation, of individuality. But what they do know is, I need something to survive. They know instinctively that if someone doesn't feed me, I will literally starve to death, because they can't even feed themselves. So if there is food 6 feet away from them and they know there's food there, they will literally starve to death unless someone feeds them. So this infant does two things. They are very in tune with their authenticity. When they're hungry, they cry. They express, I need something. They don't have the words, but they express themselves through crying, through fidgeting, through noise. I need food. I need my diaper changed. I'm too hot. I'm uncomfortable. They express themselves freely. I want this. So they have authenticity, and they have genuine need to survive, because an infant will literally die if they overheat, if they're too cold, if they're too thirsty, if they're too hungry. They will literally die. They need someone to keep them alive. And instinctively, they know this. So something happens when an infant is stressed and doesn't believe the world is safe and that I'm in a position of abundance where it comes easily to me. That infant realizes I am at risk, and it realizes instinctively. So they're not thinking it through words and images. They realize, I am not in a safe place. I need to get this fulfilled or else I die. And I've got to figure out how to do it. And the mind is naturally adapting to its environment in an attempt to be able to survive. So the sacrifice that mind makes unknowingly and instinctively is it severs itself from its authenticity in an attempt to get its needs met. So if mom is busy, if she's a busy businesswoman, doesn't have a lot of time with her kids, that child senses the lack of presence from the primary caregiver and tries to adapt to that. One of the ways is, I will try to become more likable. I will try to make myself more likable to my caregiver so that I will get the need that my needs fulfilled through them in order to survive. And that makes perfect sense from an infant perspective. Absolutely perfect. Now that thinking, those patterns, they end up imprinting themselves on their mind, and they persist into adulthood. So here I'm closing the loop. As an adult, we feel there's something missing in my life. I'm not content. I feel agitated. I feel unfulfilled. That's because something's missing, and I need to get this in order to survive.
Hmm.
So a guy might find this cute looking woman and goes, oh man, I want her. Something in his mind clicks. It's not a logical, rational thing. Man, I want that. I really want it. He doesn't realize this is a really primitive level. This is based on purely her shape. She's got a pleasing shape and a pleasing face. And there's something about the way she walks that I find appealing. It might even resemble something from early life, such as this vaguely resembles my mom when she was young. That it could be something as simple as that. But the mind says, I want this and I believe this will make me happy for getting it. And so the guy engages on trying to, quote, get the girl, end quote. Doesn't even know her, but he's trying to get her because I think she's hot. So purely an autopilot, there's something going on. I feel this loneliness and I believe it's because of lack. And I believe the answer to this loneliness is to get a girlfriend. Ah, okay. Cute looking girl. I want it. Try to get it. And what they don't realize is the reason why I'm feeling lonely is because in infancy, I disconnected from my authentic self. I don't have a good relationship with who I am. Therefore, I don't feel connected to others. And that's a lifetime journey to come to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. So there's a few different places we could go. One of them is through that time, you let's say you get the girl, or that guy gets the girl.
Yeah.
And then there's this new energy that's experienced. There's this honeymoon experience, and there's the success of having achieved something. And then all of the old problems come back. And yet then there's a reference point of like, okay. So actually, I'm still fundamentally the same person with the same needs. This didn't solve my problem, as it were.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you think about, this is a kind of iterative process of, okay, not necessarily trying to solve the problem, but you went for something. You saw something you think you wanted and you went for it. And then there's something else on the other side of it. And so you are a different person in a sense because you now have this new experience. And I'm trying to think, creatively, I think there's something about giving yourself more resources, more to go off, more things to arrange, rather than just trying to think it through. And I'm not saying that that's what you're suggesting, but it's kind of bringing in this awareness of, okay, this isn't going to solve my problem, but what can I learn through the process?
Yeah.
I think it's the perspective.
You've touched on something vital, and that is an experience doesn't teach us anything. What teaches us something is the reflection upon the experience. So you can have a bunch of experiences and learn nothing from it. Or you can have one experience and say, what does that teach me? What have I learned from this one thing? And here's a real example. When I got divorced from relationship number 2, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to live in a mansion with 3 supermodels who are all into me and I could just have that experience? Wouldn't that be awesome? And I just imagined that in my mind. Wouldn't that be great? Well, I happened to get a third partner, my third long-term partner. She was very much into don't expect monogamy from me. And I said the same thing. I don't want that either. I just want to be a free guy. I just want to live my life. So we were both doing that. She was very attractive. And she was, from her previous marriage, was very familiar with swinging. So I ended up in the swinging world, the swinger world, accidentally, but wanted to get there. Liked the idea. As soon as I stepped into a swinger club, I thought, this is amazing. The dance music is hitting there. There's all sorts of these gorgeous women. Everyone's dressed to the nines. And I thought, this is it. This is what I want. I have an abundant access to women and to an abundance of sexuality. Isn't this going to be awesome? That's what I believed. And the great thing is I had an opportunity to test that over and over. And I wasn't a smart guy. I didn't figure it out on the first or second or third or eighth or 20th time. But eventually something hit me. Steve, you thought this would be awesome, but it's not. What's with that? Why is it not awesome? Eventually something hit me where, I've been doing this for years and, I'm on Cialis and I'm still having erectile issues occasionally. And every time I hook up with this new woman, she's gorgeous, but it's not great. What's with all this stuff? So I stopped and I reflected upon it and something hit me. You thought this would be great. You've done the test and it's not great. Come to terms with it. This thing you wanted that you imagined would be wonderful, you've got it and it's not wonderful. How many times do you want to keep on repeating that cycle until you really get this ingrained in your mind that I imagined this, but it's not how I imagined it? So really what was happening is before I got into the swinging world, the projection, the mental projection was, I think that if I had a lot of sex and a lot of gorgeous women around me, I would be happy. That's what I believe. And I was lucky to have that experience over and over again and not have the outcome that I expected. So I had a choice of either try it again, or realize, I've done this dozens of times and it's still not awesome. Maybe it's not the answer. That's the conclusion it came to. So, okay, that's not the answer. Well, don't keep on doing that then. Explore something else.
Yeah. So let's kind of touch on the creative process in this pattern solving, because we have, whether it's that example or, experiencing our triggers in various arguments, like the things that come up again and again and again, and how creativity, in a sense, and this is one way of framing it through sort of the work that I do, but there's kind of this moment where we can choose to create something new, which, I think when we last spoke, you spoke about creativity as, the production of something new or novel or something like this. And there's an element of trust there as well, because it can be scary when you're, it can be scary to try something new, to break out of the pattern. And so it makes sense. Maybe you go through that whole cycle 10, 12, 20 times before you're really exhausted enough to say, okay, maybe I can try something else.
Yeah.
So maybe speak a little bit about creating new patterns.
Okay. This is interesting because it relates to neuroplasticity. The brain is forever neuroplastic, meaning it has the ability to change. That's one characteristic that's inherent to the brain. And of course, there are 2 times in our life when the brain is explosively neuroplastic. From age 0 to 7, that is the brain is incredibly changing and rewiring. The second time is during puberty. So roughly age 12-ish to roughly 18, 19-ish. We get a second dose of neuroplasticity. And incidentally, that's when we tend to fall in love. So it's not coincidental. So the brain has the capacity to be neuroplastic. So after 20-ish, it starts slowing down, but it doesn't mean it solidifies. It just means that neuroplasticity is not as explosive as it was during 0 to 7 or during our teens, but we're still neuroplastic. That's one tendency. The other tendency the brain naturally has is to reuse patterns. So understand the brain is efficient and lazy and wants to reuse patterns, but it can change. But its natural default is reuse a pattern. So first thing is choose to say, I want to change. I want to be creative. I am choosing to be creative. And the way you do that is by not following traditional patterns. And one classic example is Pablo Picasso, famous artist. We think of Picasso as that strange abstract guy, the guy that drew those very strange, non-realistic images. But the reality was that before he did that, Picasso had mastered realism. He got really good at that. But he realized everyone's doing this. And people have been doing this since the Dutch masters, hundreds of years ago when there were no cameras. And the purpose of painting was to try to photorealistically reproduce something. That's what the purpose was. And people were doing that. Some had changed their direction, like the Impressionists or pointillism, where people started exploring different ways of expressing a visual image, but not trying to do it through photorealism. Well, Picasso did he swung the pendulum to the opposite extreme. He said, "I'm going to do something really different." So the first thing is the choice of I want to do something different. I choose to do something different. Knowing that in that choice, we're going to have to step out of our comfort zone because familiarity is comfortable. I know the solution. I know how to make this work. And that's comfortable. I need to make money. I know how to do this painting. I know what sells. Great. Okay, I can keep on reproducing this stuff in this genre because I know it sells. That's safe. That's comfortable. But if you want to get creative, you're going to, by necessity, you're going to have to step out of your comfort zones. You're going to have to stretch where I'm comfortable and step into that zone of, I'm not sure about this. Great. That's awesome that you're not sure about it. Now we're getting somewhere. And
Yeah.
and to speak to neuroplasticity is it's hard to shut off a pattern. So if I tell you, don't think about a white elephant, and now I'm going to have a discussion about something else, in your mind, you're thinking about this white elephant because I told you don't do it. So by planting that seed, now you've got a focus of, I'm trying not to think of that white elephant. I'm trying, but it's there, but I'm trying, but it's there. So it's hard to switch off a pattern, but it's easier to introduce a new one. And at first, the new pattern is going to be difficult and it's going to be unfamiliar. It's going to feel unnatural. But if we practice that new pattern, it then becomes our new habit. So, for example, the pattern might be, I know this works, do it this way. And we might create a new pattern saying, daily, I'm going to try something that is unfamiliar to me. I'm going to allow myself to make mistakes and know that I'm going to explore something that will be non-productive, that will be a dead end. And I give myself permission to do that non-productive stuff. And the purpose isn't do something crappy, do something that I know for sure will fail, that will be not productive. That's not the purpose. The purpose is allow myself to do something and explore without the objective of it should be productive, it should be money making, it should be conforming to these standards, is allow yourself to do that exploration. And here's a real life example. Telescopes, including radio telescopes, are expensive to maintain and expensive to produce, so their time is valuable. The world's telescopes that are aimed into the heavens to look at various things, trying to do planetary motion, exploring things like dark energy, they make it a policy that if you want to reserve their time, you've got to have a paper that says, here's what I'm looking for. Here's how I'm going to go about doing it. Here's the part of the sky I'm looking at. Here's why it's important. And they review these papers and they take the most important ones, the ones they believe are going to be best, and they give those people telescope time. They make it a policy to reserve 10% of their time for non-productive work, meaning they look at the harebrained propositions, ones that they think, this is really weird. It doesn't sound insane, but this sounds really weird. Let's give some time to this. And one example is some astronomer came up with the idea of aiming a number of telescopes at a part of the sky that appeared to be totally void. And they required a fair amount of time. They required not just a few minutes. This was months worth of time, a few hours a day for months, that would focus at the specific area of empty night sky and focus at it for a long time in order to pull in the most faint images of anything that might be there. Sounds like a harebrained idea. And now there's a famous image that's available from NASA, and it's called the Deep Field Study. In that area where scientists thought there's nothing there, our telescopes are saying nothing's there, when they spent months of research time just looking there, gathering the faintest photons, the faintest radio signals, and compiling it, they discovered it was full of billions of extremely distant galaxies that were too faint to detect normally. And they went, holy shit, this is amazing. And you can get that image now. I think it's something like 200 gigabytes, a huge image. But it shows you that every little dot you see there, when you put it on your 24-inch monitor, every dot is a galaxy. And then when you zoom in, you start seeing, holy shit, this is an entire galaxy. It's not just a dot. These are like the Milky Way, and there's billions and billions of them there. So there's one example of allow yourself to make mistakes, allow yourself to go in a direction you haven't done before, and allow yourself to explore, knowing that you don't have the objective of it's got to be something. It's just explore for the sake of exploration. That's what children do.
Yeah, so there's something kind of in this as well, especially with that example, which is, fantastic. And yet it's an example where the process leads to a success. And then there's, there's countless others which didn't make it. And, and you mentioned a really important word. It's like the permission. And I think that's part of where the tension lies. We step into the tension, we leave our comfort zone, we're in the tension, and we think, well, it must lead somewhere, Yeah.
Otherwise, I've wasted my time.
I've wasted my time. Exactly.
That's the belief. We're lack-based and we're defect-based. This is a bad process, so I won't do it. It's not going to lead to anything productive. I'm going to waste my time, and time is valuable, and I lack time, so I won't do it. We believe that, so we typically choose to go to the reliable and the productive, in air quotes. But if we give ourselves permission to say, I'm just going to explore this, see where it goes.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. So I want to kind of go from here and rewind a bit to this swingers lifestyle, if you like.
Sure. Sure.
And we know where that ended up. Like it wasn't it wasn't the success, and it didn't lead to lasting happiness in that one experiment.
Yeah.
Or various. And yet it fits the mold of many of the things that society says that will make us happy, and there's this element of the outstanding. Perfectionism comes into this a little bit, that you're surrounded by beauty, choice, options, freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are many of the qualities that in their, in certain expressions, I'm sure can be appreciated, but in many others, don't really lead us anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I find this idea of outstanding or excellence quite interesting, because there's this striving for these, striving for objective measures of value, if we like, and
Mm-hmm.
something where we can be seen as worthy. And that's great. And yet it creates this, it's almost like this golden handcuff, because it stops our ability to really explore where we want to go, where our soul or spirit or just curiosity might be calling to us, because that's the real unknown. And at least in this place, while we're not happy, at least there's the bonuses of having some of the kind of trinkets that come with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wonder if you could just kind of speak freely, if you like, around this idea of kind of the outstanding, the kind of the trap or the cult of excellence, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big topic. That in itself would be a great podcast in itself. So I live in Canada, just north of New York. So Ontario, Toronto area, similar to America in many ways. So if people live in America, they'll understand this. The US is very much driven on this concept of be the best you can be productive. There's a mantra, there's this doctrine of being outstanding, being excellent. And it's a dual-edged sword. On one hand, it pays off. It might pay off in terms of financial remuneration. It might. It doesn't always. So it doesn't mean if you're the best, you automatically get compensated. It doesn't mean that if you're the best, you're happy. And a good example is world-class athletes. They're the best there is. If you take a look at a gold medal winner from the Olympics, they don't win that gold medal and say, I've now accomplished what I've set out my whole life to do. I can now kick back and do nothing, and I'm just totally happy. Their life seems deflated because they've got the big deal, and it's not a big deal anymore. It seems anticlimactic. That's one real example. The other is the striving for excellence is, in a way, it is a corruption of people that are making money off of us. So during the Industrial Revolution, wealthy industrialists created towns in England, entire towns, entire villages around their factories. So you lived in the factory-built housing because you couldn't afford your own house. You went to the factory-built schools because you didn't have any other resources. You went to the factory church. So they literally control those things. You bought at the factory store. You bought your food at the factory store and the factory outlet. So everything was around these industrialists, and they propagated this thought. And that is, if you work long enough and hard enough, you will become happy. You will get all the great stuff in life, and you will even become a rich guy like me. So that's the American dream: is work long enough, hard enough, you'll get rich and you'll get everything you want. And if you've noticed, the vast majority of people are working long and hard, and the vast majority are not getting rich and are not happy. But yet they continue to believe, as long as I can do this, if I can just do this, work longer, work harder, I can get it. Or if I can just be the best, if I can only be excellent, I can get what I want. And what they're striving for is a sense of happiness, that sense of well-being that I discussed earlier with those 5 points, that well-being checklist. I want to feel whole. I want to feel content. I want to feel fulfilled. If I only created something excellent, I would feel fulfilled. And what is really going on is that feeling of lack we have that originated almost certainly in childhood from trauma. That's the thing that gives us the sense of lack that tells us, I'm not good enough. I've got to be excellent. I've got to stand out in a crowd. I've got to get attention.
Can I
I've
just
got to
pause
get
you
all.
there
Go
and
ahead.
ask you to give your definition of trauma?
Yes. World famous trauma specialist Gabor Mate defines trauma as it's not the event, it is the mind's reaction to an event that later causes you to live a diminished or restricted life. So something happens, your mind reacts to it, and then later on in life, you're living a diminished or restricted life. And that conforms to I need to create something excellent because I don't feel I'm good enough. I don't feel I'm being noticed. I don't feel I'm being seen. I don't feel I'm getting the love I want, the adoration I want. If only I could write something or post something to Facebook and get 1,000 likes, wouldn't that be awesome? If only I could write that bestseller and people would be clamoring to get my autograph, wouldn't that be awesome? I'd feel happy. So the reason why we're striving for excellence is because in our root, we believe I'm not good enough. Here's a real example. I'm a software guy. I've been writing software for decades. And for most of my life, I strived for creating the most amazing, best software, the fastest, has the best searches, has the best user interface. And I was constantly frustrated because why are people not willing to go for the best? And the reality is, everyone is constrained by something. And usually in business, it's time and money. I have a business need. I'm bleeding. I need to shore up my expenses. I need a solution within 6 months. Do the best you can for 100 grand in 6 months. Do the best that you can. And the limit is 100 grand, 6 months. What can you do for that amount of money in that amount of time? But I could do amazing for $250,000 in a year, but I need a solution now because in a year I'll be dead. My company will be bankrupt in a year if we keep on going in this direction. So I need a solution that's appropriate for my needs in 6 months. And life is like that. We're aiming for excellent when in fact, the bigger question is, but are you happy? But I want a Rolls Royce because the craftsmanship and the beauty and the elegant design is beyond. It is so beautiful. But are you happy? Do you think you'll be happy when you get your Rolls? Do you think you'll be transformed by that Rolls? Or are you going to be the same guy driving in a Rolls? The answer is whatever you carry inside, you'll be the same guy when you become a millionaire. So if you want to be a happy millionaire, work on being happy, because then when the millions come, you'll already have a lot of good practice on being happy. But most people don't do that. They believe the millions will make me happy. The trophy wife will make me happy. The great job will make me happy. They aim for that. And that's what they focus on rather than focusing on the happiness. And the same thing with excellence. If only I became the most popular artist, then I would be happy. And it's not true. Here's another true story. A speaker by the name of James McNeil, he witnessed this on the stage beside Tony Robbins, the famous Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins was talking to a large crowd and said, "Yell out to me, what do you want more than anything?" And something caught Robbins's ear. A guy in the audience said, "I want to close a deal." So Robbins pointed the guy and got him up on stage, gave him a mic and said, "Would you be okay talking with me about this for a few minutes?" The guy goes, "Yeah, sure." "What did you say that you want more than anything else in the world?" The guy says, "I want to close a deal." "That's what I want. So shut up. That's what I want." Rob said, "Okay, cool. So what does that deal get you?" And the guy says, 200 grand commission. Says, "Awesome. So given the choice between the two, if you could have only one, what should you want? Closing the sales deal or the 200 grand cash?" The guy says, "Well, the money, of course." "Okay. So what you really want is 200 grand. What does that get you?" And the guy says, "Well, I want to get a car." "Okay. So just any car?" "No, I want to get a Lamborghini." "All right. So given the choice," the guy goes, "Lamborghini, of course." "Okay. So what you really want is a Lamborghini." "All right. What does a Lamborghini get you?" The guy says, "A woman." And Robin says, "So you want babes?" And the guy says, No, not babes. I just want to find one woman." "Well, why do you want, what does that get you? What does that woman get you?" He says, "Well, I want to feel loved." And the guy was in tears on stage. And Robin says, "Okay, you're not looking for closing the deal. You don't want the 200 grand. You don't want the car. You don't want the babes. What you want, and you don't even want the woman. What you want is the feeling of being loved. That's what you're really looking for. Now that you know that, Change your focus. And that is the deeper story within all of us. We're striving for excellence. Okay, what does excellence get you? It gets me fame. What does fame get me? It gets me adoration from thousands. What does that get you? Well, people will think well of me. Why do you want people to think well of you? Because I really want to be a somebody. Why do you believe you're not a somebody right now? Every one of us is a somebody that has amazing stories. We just don't know them because they're not flashing on a billboard on our forehead. If you sit down with somebody and ask them, what is your insanity? What drives you crazy? What are you passionate about? If anything was possible, what would you be doing? Then you start getting inside someone rather than they're looking for more money and a bigger job. I wish I was famous. I wish I was a rock star. So it's that stuff inside us, typically from early life trauma, that causes us to believe we live in a lack-based, defect-based world. I'm not good enough. If only I was excellent, then I would be loved. I would feel loved. I lack love. That's why I need it from external sources rather than fixing my inner stuff so that I could feel love even when I'm alone in a room, even when I'm alone during COVID lockdown for a year and haven't socialized for a year, I still feel loved and connected. It's that inner stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so much here of, I think it'd be cool to go from here. This is kind of loving the process.
The process is everything. We focus on the outcome. And this comes back to life too, we're talking about creativity. Your thing is creativity. So when we put that in the context of life is we focus on the end thing. But the end thing isn't, I got a Ferrari. The end thing is, I figured out how to get a Ferrari.
Yes.
I did this. I wasn't a millionaire before. I didn't have the income before, and I figured it out. I didn't know how to make a lot of money, and I figured it out. I didn't know how to enjoy my life through work. I hated that because I just wanted to get to the end. I wanted to become a millionaire, but I figured out how to enjoy my life day to day. Every day I get up and I'm going, I like this job. And yeah, it's making me money. I like that too. But man, I like getting up knowing that I'm doing something I like doing. Yeah, and it generates money. Yeah, it's getting me closer to the Ferrari. That's great. But I love what I'm doing. So by the time the Ferrari arrives, you go, yeah, that's nice. It's nice. But the great thing was the last 5 years, man, I've transformed what I'm doing on a daily basis. I transformed my journey.
Yes.
5 years ago, I was a guy who was thinking, my life is crap. I'm in a dead end job and I want a Ferrari. That would make me happy, but I hate my life. I hate my house. I don't like what I'm doing. I transformed all that. And as a byproduct, I got a Ferrari. And now the Ferrari is not that important. I like it. It's nice. It's really enjoyable, but it's not the big deal it used to be because who I am inside is transformed. I now enjoy the process. And that process is the process of creation. So to get back to your theme, is humans are naturally creative. We love freedom and we love creativity. Children know this. They're connected. They're connected to their authenticity. That's why children, when they get out their crayons, they're not drawing within the lines. They're not using blue for sky, green for grass. They're creative. They're explosively creative because they haven't been trained to rein that in and to conform. That's what we want to bring ourselves back to is if you want to be creative, is allow yourself to not draw between the lines, to not use blue for sky, green for grass. Allow yourself to step outside of the borders of what is expected and what is known. Allow yourself to step out of that, including the decisions you make in life. Occasionally take a wrong route on the way home. Take a detour where you don't normally drive, and you might discover, I've never seen that house before. God, I'd love to live there, and I could afford it. I would have never discovered this house if I had not taken the detour. Allow yourself to talk to a stranger, not with the purpose of hooking up or to get something out of it, but just to discover a stranger. And through that conversation, you might go, whoa, this person is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a quote here that just has been kind of rattling around in my mind. It's by Georgia O'Keeffe, and she says, I've already settled it for myself, so flattery and criticism go down the same drain. I'm quite free.
Yeah.
And, there's something in that, especially with the stranger example. It's like whether it goes well, whether it doesn't. When you really are focused on the process and you've got that much settled, then it really doesn't matter what comes out of it because
True.
you're alive.
Yeah.
There's this very sense that you're using your life to explore as your heart is beating and the breaths you're taking and you're using it to explore what you can. And
Yeah.
the good or the bad, it's all welcome in a way.
And let me put this in the context of relationships, creativity in relationships. A decade ago, I believed I will be happy when I end up with the dream woman. Actually, just a bit more than a decade, because my third long term partner appeared to be that dream woman. I thought if I could only find a woman who is ethically non monogamous, really gorgeous, very sexy, wouldn't my life be awesome? And I always had this lack in my life is I had a hard time connecting with people. I didn't have any female friends. And I didn't know it at the time. That's because I judged every female within the context of, are you the kind of woman that I want to pair up as a partner? Or are you the kind of woman I want to have sex with? That was it. It never occurred to me to have a female friend. And I had no female friends. And I had very few male friends. I had very few friends in life because everything was objective driven. So I had a lack of women, even though I was trying to get women in my life. So here I am now, and I end up with wonderful relationships. Virtually all of my female relationships are platonic because when I connect with a woman now, it's not with the expectation or the judgment of, are you the kind of girl I want to bang? Are you the kind of girl I want to marry? It's just, you're human. You're just a person. And if she happens to look gorgeous, okay, you're a human that has these attributes. Big deal. That's not a big deal. You can't base a relationship on looks. It's nice, but it's not the basis of the relationship. So the process has now changed where it's no longer objective driven. It's no longer, I believe I'll be happy when I get a girl, therefore I'm trying to get a girl. Now I have the ability to connect with people, and it happens in abundance. People reach out to me, strangers reach out to me and just chat with me. And there's no objective of, can I get her number? Can I make this into something? Can this be a long-term thing? Some of these events are just 20 minutes at a grocery store. There's this wonderful conversation that happens. I never see them again. And it's okay because I'm not living in a world of lack where I've got to get his or her number. This guy would make a great friend. He's got some amazing resources. I've got to get his number so that I can continue this. No, don't worry about that. I live in a world of abundance now where, of course, that stuff happens. So, of course, I can connect with people because the process is different. I'm no longer expecting anything from anybody. Just let them be. Let the relationship evolve naturally based on the people in it rather than I'm looking for a pair bond. Got to get someone to fit into the pair bond model. Are you it? Yeah, you're pretty good. I think you're pretty close. Yeah. Okay. So you're the one. Okay, great. We're a pair bond now. Now, how do we make it work? Oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. Okay. So you got to change so I can feel better about it. That's the typical recipe as opposed to don't be in a rush. Hey, I like you. Cool. Let's see more of each other. Cool. And then 2 years later, when the new relationship energy has faded away and you both are really seeing each other clearly, she's seen you unshaven for 2 or 3 days. She's seen you, she's dropped over and you haven't had a shower and you're not feeling your best. And you say, yeah, come on in. I was just making breakfast. Want to join me? And you feel that comfortable with each other. Then you're in a clearer mind where you have seen into each other and you're not looking at someone to try to fulfill your childhood wounds. I don't feel loved. I need you to make me feel loved. You're not feeling that anymore. You're already whole as an individual. You're fine for weeks on end not seeing her. You're okay not being in contact. You're totally fine. But when you're together, you're going, I'm loving this. I am present. I'm here. I'm now, and I'm focused on you. My phone is in the other room and I don't miss it. I don't care. I'm here enjoying this experience with you. When we get in that mental state, we're in a different way of living because the process is different. We're no longer looking to fill lack. We're now living our authentic self, and our processes reflect that. I don't need you to make me happy, but I enjoy your company. And
Yeah.
that might extend into, let's live together for a week and see how well we get along. And I will not be on my best behavior. I will do my best not to be on my best behavior, and I'll ask you to be the same. Just be as authentic as you can be, and let's explore that and see what that's like. See if we like living with each other.
Yeah, I mean, even just hearing you talk about it, there's a level of levity, there's something quite light about being able to even propose experiments like this.
Yeah.
So I think in the traditional model, even let's just take the words I love you, or let's live together, or let's, all of these different things, they're seen as weighted decisions. You know, they're
Yes.
important, they're
You're-
heavy.
Yep.
And I think, again, speaking just through my lens of creativity, whenever you add this weight to it, then you immediately kind of limit and narrow your ability to interact with the situation creatively, lightly, playfully, all of these things that actually lend themselves to better outcomes. And yet
Yeah.
we think that if we approach these decisions or these invitations with a sense of duty, and we've really considered all of the outcomes and it's finally the time to make the proposal, then, you know, maybe it can be this grand reveal. And yet that sort of front loads it with so much pressure.
You're right.
Both of you can no longer sort of play fluidly. So I love what you say as well, is
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to try and be my best. I'm going to
Yeah.
try and do the opposite. I'm going to try and kind of be the crappiest version of myself. Let's see if we can get along in that sense.
Yeah. See, the route that most of us take is we start with a position of lack and defect, and we don't realize it. We start with things like saying, "Well, I'm not perfect. I want someone to love me, warts and all." Uh, and I know she's not perfect. We say things like that, and we believe I'm in a position of lack, and what I need is a woman in my life to make me happy. If we become that person who has that scores well on that well-being checklist, I am whole and I'm complete. I feel totally fine on my own. It doesn't mean I become a hermit. It just means I am complete as myself. I don't need a better half to complete me. I don't need to look at a woman and say, "You complete me. You had me at Ferrari." You don't need that stuff. I'm happy as I am. I am content. So I'm not pissed off at some part of my life as I should have been something, but I'm not. I am feeling fulfilled where I'm not striving, where I need this in order to feed something within me, and I'm not restless, and I'm never lonely. If we have that, and we come to another person, then we're not loading up our relationship with the expectations of I come to you as a person who doesn't feel whole, I'm discontent, I'm not fulfilled, I'm lonely when I'm alone, and I come to you to fill my inner voids and to fulfill me and to fill my needs. That's what I need from you. So, and unfortunately, two people come together like that. And this famous relationship counselor, Dr. Shefali, calls that the twin beggars syndrome, where two beggars come together and say, you will make me wealthy. You will fulfill me with everything I need. You will make me whole. And they don't. And the expectation. So when we come together under those conditions, we project our desires upon the other, our hopes, our desires, our wants, our expectations. Those are all our projections. And we expect the other to fulfill us rather than saying, hey, just be you. You're free. You always have been free. You're free with me. Don't be on your best behavior. Be authentic. Let's discover who we really are and let the relationship evolve naturally based on who we truly are. And it might be, I've discovered the best dance partner in the world. And I see her, well, maybe once, twice a year at a club. She happens to be there and she's the world's best dancer. We're together as a couple when we dance. We just do amazing dancing stuff. And I never see her, but she's a wonderful dancer. You might find someone who's an amazing dinner date and conversationalist. And you have no desire to live with them because they would drive you nuts. I'm a neat freak and she's messy. I'd hate that. Well, you don't need to live together and you don't need to become a couple. You can just have wonderful dates. You have wonderful connections together, wonderful conversation, wonderful food, wonderful hangout, walking down a beach or down a street and downtown, whatever it is, that parcel is wonderful. It doesn't have to be everything. You have that freedom to explore. And then you get the possibilities showing up going, wow, I have so many wonderful friends in my life. And I don't have a partner. I don't have one person that's everything, but together they make a superset of anything I could have imagined a decade ago. My life is so full and so rich, in large part because of who I am. And because of who I am, the processes I engage, my daily activity, my daily way of being has invited all this wonderful stuff that wouldn't have been possible before. Because the only way I used to relate to women was, are you a bed buddy? Are you a partner? And now it's, hey, you're human, just like me.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be sex. It doesn't have to be anything. It's just we're connecting as two humans.
You mentioned exploring just a second ago,
Yeah.
and I want us to bring that back to the title of this series, which is Pioneering Enchantment.
Mm.
And I'm just curious to hear you sort of riff on what those words mean to you. And they don't have to be positive, you know, take it in
Okay.
whichever direction you like.
Yep.
Um, But yeah, that would be interesting.
A rampage on exploration. What is exploration to me? Uh, it is stepping out of my comfort zone, risk, possibly feeling uncomfortable, forcing myself, having to be accountable for the outcome and not liking it, um, disappointing others, discovering new aspects of myself that I have never known before, discovering a new perspective on life that I had never known before, new opportunities and new avenues to things that I had never imagined before. Uh, Discovering I have superpowers that I had never realized. Discovering that another person is incredible in ways that I had never been able to see before. Being able to look around a room and find amazing things that I appreciate that I had been taking for granted because they're just part of the furniture, but realizing I like this. I love my iPhone. Isn't this amazing? Uh, those are all explorations, and there's explorations of the mind, looking inward, really looking inward rather than being afraid, uh, allowing yourself to be afraid and looking at something that feels uncomfortable and scary and going, I'm in tears, but I'm choosing to keep on looking at this and discover why am I in tears instead of trying to shut it down and trying to feel comfortable again, allowing myself to cry and going, what is that about? Watch that TV scene, watch that movie that makes you cry and say, well, what is that about? Let me watch that scene again. Why is this scene making me cry? Why does that feel familiar? Instead of shutting that off because it feels uncomfortable. Uh, Allowing myself to be authentic with myself without judgment. Allowing myself to put judgment aside. I should not. This is good, that is bad. Allowing myself to say, I want it, and that's what I want. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to explore that just because I want it. And if it hurts me, I'm accountable for that. I will explore that and I will look more deeply into that rather than I shouldn't. Those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, brilliant. There's so much there. I want to touch a little bit on negative things that can come up. Negative, maybe that's redundant, but things like anger, rage, or the things that come up when we have conflict. There's many things that we're talking about, and I think the principles stay the same. You can bring curiosity to all of those elements. You can explore all of those. The whole range of emotions. But to take this from something that sounds really good to maybe what it looks like in practice, let's dig into that a bit.
Okay, I'm going to offer you a perspective that might make things lighter for you. And that is the concept of good and bad is a mental construct. It is not true. So I'll give you an example. Um, I looked this up on my phone. I carry this with me wherever I go. It is called the emotional scale, and I got it from Esther Hicks of Abraham Hicks fame. And it's a list of emotions listed from 1 at the highest and 22 at the lowest. And I'm going to pick one emotion, anger, which is number 17. We typically label anger as a bad emotion and say, oh, don't do that, it's bad. Now, I'm going to put it into context. It's 17 out of a list of 22. At the very bottom is fear, grief, depression, despair, and powerlessness. That's the very bottom. So imagine someone who is depressed, in despair, feeling powerless. They are in bed to the point where they can't get out to brush their teeth. That's where they're at. Now, imagine planting a thought where they get so angry that they get out of bed, they get dressed, and they storm out of the house, ready to do someone some damage because they're just so angry. We might say anger is a bad experience, a bad emotion, don't do it. Or we might say, in relation to depression, grief, despair, and powerlessness, it's actually a step up. It's not a place you want to live, but it's a step up from where you were. So instead of thinking of good or bad, ask yourself, is this a step up from where I am, or is it a step down from where I am? So anger might be a conditioned response from our childhood trauma, where we instinctively, something within us just reacts with anger. Someone says something and we get angry and we think that's bad. So Someone might teach you, well, you need anger management. You need to control that anger. You need to suppress it. You need to shut it down. You need to not be angry or don't express it. Well, it's a good idea not to hit somebody. Okay. So we're managing our expression of anger to some degree, but our anger is still there. What I would suggest is don't try to control your anger, is allow yourself to be with it, but don't identify with it. Don't say, I am angry. I am anger. Instead, think of it this way. Something happened within my mind, and that mind generated the emotion of anger. And then we can look at it curiously and say, what is that about? What just happened before that emotion came up? Well, I wrote something on the internet, and a person replied, you're just an idiot who doesn't know it. You're such a lefty. And I got angry. What's that about? Oh, okay. So hang on. I'm concerned about what this person, this total stranger on the internet, thinks about me. That's kind of silly. But why did that happen as a default emotion? Why did I default to that, just jump to it without even thinking? So something within me on a deeper level, and you'll discover this from deeper exploration, something within me feels it's important that others think I am smart and wise and informed, and that others look up to me. Something wants that. And if we dig even deeper, we realize that's because I don't think that way of myself. And I'm looking for others to fill that void for me. I want others to think well of me because I don't think well of myself. There's a saying that a strong man, let me think of this quote again. Okay. I'm recalling it from memory, is that a great man cannot be made to feel small because he knows he is great. And that applies to women as well. If you think well of yourself, and it's not an ego thing, if you think well of yourself, you don't need others to confirm that or validate it.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast with a guy called Joe Hudson, and he was talking about this point of how, if fundamentally you know that what you are is good, and you've been there, then you don't argue the person who says you've done something bad, or you don't need to defend yourself against many of the things that come up in life because you know what you are.
Yeah.
In the same way where you don't feel the need to argue that the sky is blue when someone says it's purple or something like that.
And you might ask, well, tell me about your perspective. How do you see that? You're seeing a purple sky. Tell me about that. What is your perception? What is that about? And we might discover that what I call blue, another person calls the exact same color, a different label. They just called it purple, but we're seeing the same thing. All right. That's curious. We're just using different labels for the same thing. Okay. That's all right.
What do you make of, there's in all spheres of life, there's the opportunity to grow, to develop, to kind of, find the good within any situation. And yet there are many situations which we decide not to put ourselves in. So maybe on the internet you decide, actually, I'm not going to talk on certain platforms about certain things because it just gets me in trouble, or so even if we can grow and reflect and take those opportunities, we also start to make decisions so that we limit our exposure to certain things, not necessarily because we haven't done the work or something, but because of other reasons. So maybe if you could speak a little bit about that, as far as what a good life perhaps, or the life that you choose to live and the experiences you choose to engage in, or the people that you engage with, they can all possibly be growing, places of development. So what informs your choices about the experiences that you choose to engage in?
Okay, so this would be a good topic for a podcast. I'll try to keep it short. The brain and the database you've collected since birth. So that includes pre-birth experiences. Trauma can actually happen pre-birth. You can be born traumatized because the brain in utero is actually developing in response to its environment. So stressed mom during gestation will result in brain development that reflects that stress. So you're carrying that part of pre-birth stress. You're carrying early childhood trauma. You're carrying social/cultural indoctrination since birth. You're laid down with all that stuff. And that's part of the database of your brain. Now, I'm going to say something that some of your audience will resonate with, and some will go, this is woo-woo. There's a school of thought that says that a component of what we are is non-physical and not time-based, that it's part of the quantum world, where we're actually on a non-physical basis, we're connected to all that is. And some people might say God, some people might call it source, some people might say that's the connection to the quantum field. So that implies that we have access to stuff that is beyond the container that is our brain. So even though we have access to it, we are also limited by the constructs of our brain. So there is no right answer of we should be this way. That means there is no right answer of you should grow. And even the concept of growth implies there is a right outcome and we're striving towards it. What I would suggest to you is it's all a matter of choice. So if you choose that I want to grow, well, what does growth mean to you? For me, it meant I want to learn how to become a more loving, more peaceful person. That was for me. For someone else, growth might be, I want to learn how to connect with people a lot better. I want to have more peaceful relationships. I want to have more loving relationships. I want to have more fulfilling relationships. Another person's definition of growth might be, I want to be the world's fastest runner. It all depends on what you choose. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's no better or worse answer. It's just, what do you choose to explore? So your choice, I think, is how do I become more creative? How do I unlock more possibilities? And unlocking possibilities, another way of saying that is, how do I release the limits or some of the limits that are currently imposed on my mind that I might not even be aware of? How do I loosen that up so that I can become more creative, so that I invite more possibilities into my life? It's just a choice. One person says, I want to make more money. Okay, cool. Learn how to become a billionaire. Figure that out. Another person might say, I want a life of leisure. Cool. Figure that out. You're going, I want to figure out how to be more creative. All right. So if you want to look at that deeper, what are you striving for through your creativity? Are you aiming for an outcome, or are you just saying, I don't know what's there, but what I would like to do is discover what possibilities are there once I start peeling back these limits of my mind, when I start learning how to unlock the potential of being able to make choices that I wouldn't normally make. What is out there? It's just exploration. So your curiosity is what's motivating you to say, I don't know what's there, and I just want to figure it out, want to see what's there. No objective other than I just want to discover. So it's just a choice. Whatever a person chooses, that's what they will focus on.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. I love that, I think choice is one of those things as well that is so empowering when we're given the choice, and not a limited choice, and I think, and sometimes limits, okay, I want to choose to paint a picture, and I'm going to choose to paint it on this size piece of paper, and that can actually help you.
Yeah.
Of course you can work within those boundaries and find benefit in limitation. But yeah, I think one of the nicest things I've found in relating is when people give you the choice. I think that's an important part of engaging, when you're given a choice.
Here's an alternative perspective. People will give you their choices. You either have to stop seeing that girl or else you have to leave. That's the choices they might give you. Now, allow your mind to expand beyond the choices you're given.
Mm-hmm.
So she says, you've got to stop seeing that girl or else you've got to leave. You might choose to say, I love you and I love Shirley. I love both of you and I care about both of you. I don't want to leave. That's my choice. Now, mind you, you're free. So I will always be honest with you. If this is not suitable for you, then you can choose to leave, but I don't want to leave you.
Yeah.
So there's an example of stepping right outside of the choices you've been given, realizing the choices available to me are not the ones, they're not limited to the ones that are presented before me. Of course, there's more choices. So just allow yourself to be mindful of that. Is every time you see something and think, my choices are X, Y, Z, realize there's more and more choices. There's lots more. I'm just not seeing them at the moment. So slow it down and allow yourself to ponder, what other possibilities are there beyond the choices that have been presented to me and the ones I've imagined so far? What other choices could there possibly be? If anything was possible, what would it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this element of choice is so, it's so deep and so powerful because I think powerlessness comes from the feeling, or in part comes from the feeling of that there's no actual choice. There's no potential to change something
Yes.
here. I definitely grew up and I going through school and reading encyclopedias. I remember just having this feeling that everything in the world had already been discovered. And and the
Yeah.
process of school was simply to learn that which had already been discovered and then choose what role you needed to play within the mix of, within the factory that had already been created.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know how many other people sort of have that experience, but every moment of great sort of liberation throughout my life has been, this just, that it's laughingly absurd that that was ever the case. And I don't know if it can be taught, and I imagine we can do a better job,
Yeah.
but just that feeling of, being in moments of sort of liberation and expansion and acknowledging, wow, I can do this in so many different ways. So many
That's
different ways.
that's the difference between the employee mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset. The employee mindset says, what do I have to learn to get a job and be able to get the money I want through my job? The entrepreneur says, what can I create to create wealth? So we humans, we are born being natural creators. And it's arguable that we are infinite creators because we're living within the quantum field of infinite possibilities. But those possibilities become a funnel that is narrowed down by the choices we make. And the choices we make are largely based on what we're taught is possible or not,
Mm-hmm.
who we're taught we are, what we're taught we should and should not do. We start narrowing down our choices to, but that's not ethical. That's not proper. A man should not do that. This is what I should be doing. I was born into this class, therefore I should not. That stuff limits us. But you're right, is once you realize I'm an infinite creator, I can create. What do I choose to create? So we stop asking, what does the future hold for me? And we start asking, what do I choose to co-create?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, beautiful.
I use the word co-creation because none of us are the creator. None of us can control the world around us. So we can't modify the world to be exactly as we want. However, we can co-create within the context of everyone else co-creating as well. So our creation mushes up against other people's creations. We come together and say, I'm doing this. Another one says, I'm doing this. Hey, cool. We can overlap here. And there's some synergy when we do this together. Cool. Let's explore that. But you're right, is you're an infinite creator, and you realize that at a younger age than many people do.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we're sort of getting to the end, but
All right.
I just want to touch on, the theme of your book at least. And I know that we've already explored all of this, already, but lasting happiness. If we
Yes.
could kind of round up any way, which way you like, by exploring maybe some of the things that feel important to this conversation that you haven't touched on, just to do with your work, things that have come about, and I think that, as I say, we've already done it all in one way. But if there's any other form of expression you want to go down, then let's do
Yeah.
that.
My book, the theme about my book is discovering lasting happiness. So many people want to find happiness, but they don't realize that. What do you believe happiness is? Is it a transitory thing that is just a reflection of your circumstances? I have a nice car, so I'm happy. My car broke down, I'm unhappy. I've got good food, I'm happy. I don't have lunch money, I'm unhappy. If that's what you believe, then you're a victim of your circumstances. You're always a reflection of what is being thrown at you. So finding happiness isn't a matter of finding it, it's a matter of becoming the person who is capable of generating their own well being. And the way you do that is actually part of your creative process. And that is learn how to unlearn the stuff that's holding you back from being that creative person who has the ability to generate your own well being and happiness, and pick up stuff that is more conducive to that. And that's an ongoing process. There's never an end. So happiness is not black and white. It's not either I'm happy or I'm not. It's I'm happier now than I was 5 years ago. Yeah, my life is better. I have a greater sense of well being now than a year ago. Okay, that's great. So I'm moving upwards. Yes. Where's the end? There is no end until you decide there is. You can decide I'm good where I'm at now. I'm not doing any more work. I'm just going to cruise now. Great. And at some point you can change your mind and go, okay, I'm out of cruise control. I want to just start moving again. So it is that journey that has no end, and it's okay that it has no end. And there is no objective. It's just a matter of I'm better off now. I have a greater sense of well-being and joy and inquisitiveness now than I did before. I am enjoying life moment to moment. And the beauty of this is that you become sort of detached from your circumstances. You're no longer saying, I can only be happy if my circumstances are good. Now you know how to generate your own happiness. You know how to pick up a phone and say, hey, Bill, what are you doing this weekend? Let's get together and go fishing. Or you can be totally happy on your own for a week, not seeing another human being and not feel restless in the least, because you know you're well connected with the world around you, with people, with yourself, with your own authenticity. That is the journey that I'm on. And I don't see an end in it. And I'm okay with that.
Beautiful. I have this kind of last question of the book you mentioned, you speculate maybe being finished in the next couple of years. With this process being so kind of densely packed with experience and insight, I guess, that you're still having, what's that looked like over the last sort of 10 years or so that it's been in some way in the works? What's it like to update previous epiphanies or moments of insight, and what's the sort of artistic process of editing something that is always evolving and gaining in resolution and clarity?
Okay, I'll give you a number of angles on this. Before COVID, I was at a drum circle at a person's house, and the woman across from me is just looking at me as I'm drumming. And she just keeps on glancing at me. And I've known her for years. She just looks at me occasionally and smiles. And I'm wondering what's going on there. So during a break, she walks up to me and she's smiling. I'm saying, what's that all about? And she says, I can't believe how much you've changed in the past couple of years. You're nothing like the person I met. And I said, I hope that's in a good way. She says, oh, yeah. You were so. And I said, uptight white guy. And she says, yeah. That's the person I met at a drum circle 2 years ago. You're just so uptight. You're just transformed. You're not the same person you were. So the reason why I tell you that story is it shows you that within just a matter of years, you can have such a profound transformation that the people that met you a few years ago will tell you you're not the same person. What went on? What happened? So I've been having huge transformative changes in my life because of a number of things. It's because I wanted something and I really hit hard to get it and discovered I was wrong. So I wanted to be a millionaire, and I was a millionaire, and I still wasn't happy. And I had to come to the conclusion of, okay, so it's not money. I thought it'd be being a millionaire would make me happy, and that wasn't it. Then I lost my millions, and it was worse than losing it. I was in a hole. So I was in debt to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars and totally broke. And yet my life wasn't horrible. And I was going, man, I should be miserable. I should be depressed. I should be suicidal. And I'm not. What's that about? I feared this, but here I am, and it's not as horrible as I thought. What is that about? So I had to challenge my beliefs about what is poverty and what is being destitute and what is lack of money and how horrible is that. I had to challenge beliefs. So I was regularly having to dismantle things that I believed in my mind. Being a millionaire would be great. I was. Okay, wasn't. Okay. Being in the swinger world, having access to all these gorgeous women, having sex with all sorts of these gorgeous women, that would be great. Oh, it wasn't. Okay. So I don't believe that anymore. Eventually, I had to this is an ongoing thing. I had to keep on rebuilding my model for what I thought the world was all about. And how this reflected in my book is I started writing it 10 years ago. And it's not a constant thing where I'm constantly writing it every day. Sometimes I put it on the shelf for 6 months and then I go back to it and I review it and start tweaking it. Several times I've gone back to my book and I realized the first third of this is absolute garbage. I've got to get it out. It's just, I don't think this way anymore. At the time, it was a revelation. At the time, it was my greatest truth. 6 months later, it's no longer true for me. So that is telling you that there is no truth aside from mathematical equations like the formula for a circle and a square. truth to an individual is the model that you live in your reality. If you believe I am lonely because I don't have a wife, you will do everything possible to get that wife because that's what you believe. But when you can release that belief and embrace a new one, that maybe I'm lonely because of something else, that becomes your new reality. And you start focusing in that direction and exploring that direction. Instead of focusing on, got to get a wife, you're now focusing on what within me is generating this feeling of loneliness. So my book has been getting updated. And I was fortunate because a friend of mine told me, you know, the great thing about never finishing your book is that you never have to be critiqued on it. You can live with your feeling of I'm not good enough and you never have to put it to the test. And I went, damn, she's right. So part of my procrastination of finishing my book is there's still something within me that says it's not good enough. I've got to refine it. I've got to get some more good stuff in there. Part of me just keeps on doing that. And I know that at some point I've got to get over that and go, for now, this is good enough from the first book, get it out. And then I'll have another version coming out later. I'll have additions to it. I will have revisions to it. I can do that later. But for now, I can put a stake in the ground and say, good enough for now. I'm not there yet, but I'm heading towards it.
Brilliant. Excellent. I think the mantra of good enough is a wonderful note to end on. I think that's so often what we can aim for. Good enough, and make the revisions, write the second book, as you say.
Good enough can be amazing for now, and then it can be your yesterday in a week from now, where it was good enough, but I'm beyond that now. Now it's okay.
Yeah. Steve, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom and your experiences and being so transparent with it all. And
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah. I look forward to connecting in the future, and
I would like that.
And reading your book one day.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Right. Goodbye.